Could this be a start of a run for KU basketball? They certainly need it. We'll preview the Jayhawks against the Buffaloes of Colorado.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching all of our episodes. Thank you wherever you find it, whether it's on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show, or anywhere you get your podcast, which is free and available, again, pretty much anywhere. We're going to get into a KU Colorado preview today, headlines of the game, the opponent's scouting report for the Buffaloes, and we'll also get into keys to the game and players to watch for the Jayhawks against CU as well. This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So Kansas taking on Colorado, and I guess one headline is it's a renewed conference matchup. We saw these teams play some non-conference meetings. We saw Kansas win, I think the most recent one. We saw, I think it was like Askia Booker or something like that, hit like a half-court shot to beat Kansas and the Andrew Wiggins team. But now they are back as conference foes against each other, with Colorado rejoining the Big 12. And certainly things have not gone well for Colorado. For them, they're just trying to get their first win of Big 12 play. That's kind of their headline coming into this one. For Kansas, it's the schedule opens up a little bit here in their next five, if you include this as the next five. How are you going to take advantage of it? Because I remember last season, we had kind of a similar conversation. The team had just lost, I want to say maybe it was the at Texas Tech game last season, and they were 19-6. They were 7-5 in the conference, which is their same record this year. And it was a conversation that, hey, the schedule maybe opens up a little bit here. You're at Oklahoma, who, was fine, but they weren't anything special. You were home against Texas and BYU. You had the at Baylor game, which was going to be tough, but then home against Kansas State, at Houston. Could you take care of some of those stretch of games and finish on a high note, really? And it turns out, Kansas lost at home to BYU. They lost at Baylor. They lost at Houston. And they ended up going basically 3-3 in that stretch, with a blowout loss to Houston to finish off. And then you lost on a Wednesday in the Big 12 tournament. So you weren't able to take advantage of it. Can you take advantage of it this time, right? When you look at it, versus Colorado, at Utah, at BYU, versus Oklahoma State, at Colorado. Can you go 5-0 in that stretch? Can you at least go 4-1 in that stretch? I think 4-1 keeps you afloat from the standpoint of, like, you'll feel okay about where they are. 5-0, you're going to feel like you're starting to build momentum, even if really outside. The BYU is the big one. Like, that's the one on the road where they're a top 40 team. They're an NCAA tournament team, at least I would think so. But the rest of them are ones that you should win. At the end of the day, this team doesn't always win games that they should win. So this is an opportunity for Kansas, and we'll see if they can take advantage. Also, other headline, it's the weird uniform game for KU. It's a cool story of what they're wearing the uniforms for. I will say, seeing them in person, I saw them at a local retail store. I thought they looked a little bit better in person than they did on social media. So, whatever. And I do think it's cool to throw in some alternate uniforms every now and again. And like I said earlier on the post game of the K-State, I think if they win and they win big and they look good in the uniform, then the uniforms are going to look great, and they should wear them every time they win, right? All this sort of stuff. Now, as far as the Colorado Buffaloes, they come into this one at 9-14 on the season. They're 0-12 in Big 12 play. And so, yes, they've lost 12 consecutive games. Their last win was on December 21st against Bellarmine. And they play Kansas, obviously, twice in these next 5 games. So, if you're to give up a win to them, that would be very embarrassing. That would probably be the new low of where these past couple seasons have been, if that ends up being the case. But yeah, I mean, they're consistently losing by double digits. They do have some close games in there. Right? I mean, they lost by 10 to Houston. Like, that isn't a bad loss at all, but losing by 13 at Utah, they lose by 11 at TCU. Again, close loss to Arizona State. They lose by 15 to Arizona, lose by 16 to BYU, 10 to Oklahoma State. There are only 4 games in the Big 12 so far where they have lost by even single digits. And one of those is like by 8 points. So, like, point being, this has not been a very good team, as you would imagine. If you look at conference-only numbers, they are 16th in the Big 12 in offensive efficiency. They are 15th in the Big 12 in defensive efficiency. Go beat them. Go blow them out. You look at the personnel for Colorado. Julian Hammond III has been a really good guard for them. He's averaging almost 14 points per game, over 3 assists, 1.2 steals per game, shooting 44% from the floor, 40% from three, 89% at the foul line. He's been a really good player for them. But nobody else is getting double-figure scoring for the Buffaloes at this point in time. Andre Jakimovsky is averaging close to it, 9.7 points per game, 4.4 rebounds per game, but only shooting 38%, 29% from three. Trevor Baskin, 8.5 points per game, 5.5 rebounds per game, 2 assists per game, 1.2 steals, 52%, but only 24% from three. I can go into some of the players to watch. I mean, if you're interested in the center position, Bangkok Dak, who's a 6'11", 185-pound center. Elijah Malone, who's complete opposite, 6'10", 268 pounds. And then a little bit of Baskin at the 5. It'll be very interesting to me, with Dickinson, if Dak is matched up on him, is he just able to bury him in the post? If it's Malone, you don't have as much of the weight advantage. You do have a little bit of a height advantage in that specific matchup. But you look at it for Colorado, it's, there's not a ton of players who are getting 14, 15 per game that we can kind of point out and be like, watch out for that guy. Javon Ruffin, 6 points per game is their 2-guard, 36% from three. So that's a little bit interesting. RJ Smith is shooting 42% on a little lower volume because he's playing 20 minutes per game off the bench. But yeah, man, this is just a game that I can point to a lot of these players and say, yeah, there's this guy, and he does this well. But at the end of the day, Kansas should just win this game, and you should find a way to win this game, kind of going away. Overall on the season, Colorado 159th on offense, 86th on the defensive end of the floor. Now, what they do well, what they don't do well, if you're looking at conference-only numbers, so far this is a team that has gotten to the free throw line a good amount. They're 4th in the league in being able to basically get to the free throw line, and they've shot them well when they get to the free throw line. 4th in free throw percentage in Big 12 only play. They're also at least in, I guess you would say, the middle of the pack, slightly above the upper half in 2-point percentage offense, 7th in Big 12 only games in that area. On the defensive end of the court, this is a team that's done a pretty decent job of getting blocks and steals. They're 6th in block rate, 7th in steal rate, 8th in turnover rate defense. So they're at least, have a little bit of heartbeat on that end of the court. And overall on the season, the areas that they've done best is defensive rebounding and steal rate on the defensive end, and then free throw percentage and getting to the foul line on the offensive end. But where they have struggled this season, I mean, obviously there's been a lot of struggles when you lose 12 consecutive games. They're turning the ball over at an alarming rate. They are last in Big 12 games with about a 23% turnover rate. And to show you how bad that is, so over the course of the full season, including the non-con in the Big 12, Colorado is turning the ball over 21.7% of the time on offense. That ranks 353rd in the country. And in conference play, the number's gone up from almost 22% to over 23%. So you should be able, we talked about post-game in the K-State game. Kansas basically over these last 7 games outside of the Baylor game, so 6 of the last 7 games combined, has basically put up numbers that they're forcing the worst amount of turnovers in the country. 6 of their over the last 7 games, you take out the Baylor game. So those other 6, they're only forcing like 6.5 turnovers per game. The worst team in the country this year is forcing over 7 turnovers per game. So this is the ultimate, instead of the immovable object versus unstoppable force. This is the stoppable force versus the movable object in terms of that category and what kind of ends up happening in that area. Also, this has not been a good rebounding team in Big 12 play, offensive or defensive. They are, even though they're getting to the foul line a lot, they're also putting teams to the foul line at the highest rate in Big 12 only play. They've been eviscerated from 3-point range. Teams are shooting 37% from 3 against them so far in Big 12 play. And they haven't shot well from 3 themselves. They're shooting under 31% in Big 12 only games to this point in time. Now, again, overall in the season, you include their non-con, they have been a good defensive rebounding team, but so far in conference only play, that has not carried over for them, to say the least. All right, let's get to our keys to the game for the Jayhawks to come out on top, and then we'll get to players to watch. What Jayhawk do we think can have a big game for KU? We'll get to that on the other side. Today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Wayfair. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has everything you need, all within your budget. My favorite part, the free and hassle-free delivery, even for larger items, right? You order a couch, and sometimes, it's already expensive enough to order like furniture and stuff like that, and then you're like, okay, well, I guess that fits into our budget. And then all of a sudden they lop on this huge shipping fee, and you're like, oh, well, I wasn't planning that. And you don't have to worry. Free and hassle-free delivery, even larger items. Wayfair's site was so easy to navigate, and I found everything I needed in no time. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That is wayfair.com, WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, so Kansas takes on Colorado, Tuesday night matchup here. Matchup number one, I'm not going into the stats on this one. We're just going to talk about playing with consistent energy in both halves and on both ends of the floor. This is something Bill Self talked about post-game K-State, and we've kind of seen it with our eyes throughout the season. This Kansas team has been very inconsistent. They've been inconsistent from game to game, right? You beat Duke. You lose at Kansas State. You lose at home to West Virginia, right? You beat UCF by 1 billion points on their home place. You barely beat them at your home place, right? So you can point game to game. They've been inconsistent half to half. The first half of the West Virginia game, very bad. The second half of the West Virginia game, very good until the very end of the game. You look at, I don't know, a lot of other, like Houston, a lot of the game, you played great, but the end of the sequence at the end of regulation and overtime, you didn't play so great, right? There are other games where you had, maybe bad. Arizona State, not great first half, great second half, right? TCU, not great first half, great second half. There's so many games this season and so many moments where you can point to and be like, they've been so inconsistent this year. Can you find a little more consistency on this run where you have this schedule that opens up a little bit more for you? Maybe this is what you need to find consistency and do that. Now, we're in February at this point in time. I feel like if the light switch was going to turn on this team being a more consistent team that played with energy all the time, that played with that high motor, it probably would have happened already. And I feel like playing with a high motor is more of an identity thing than it is something that happens or doesn't happen. Like, it's one thing when Remy Martin goes from being injured to not making a huge impact to making a big impact, like that comes down to just making shots and doing other things. It's another thing when it's like, oh, you're just not a team who plays with a high motor to all of a sudden ask to play with high energy. And maybe they can turn it on, like once we get to the NCAA tournament, like maybe that's what this team will be. Maybe they just need their backs against the wall at the ultimate level for that to happen. But I don't know. I would like to see it happen. Like Bill Self called it out in the press conference. Let's see if it happens in this one. And can you have two good halves, right? If you get up big in this one, you get up 12 at half. Can you win the game by 20 as opposed to winning the game by 13 and coasting the rest of the way? That's what I'm going to be looking forward to seeing, if they can kind of do that and if they take to the challenge that Bill Self kind of posed to them. And I think in a real way, I mean, you're the more talented team here. You are the better team. Kansas has had their struggles and issues this season, but you are the better team here. If you don't play with energy, they're still going to hang around though, right? And if you play like, oh, woe is me, this season is not going to, like, they're going to come in and punch you in the mouth, right? Any team is. Can you come out with energy? And if you do that, if you come out with energy, the talent and what you do well is going to show more than the things you don't do well. And it's going to cover for some of the mistakes you do make if you play at a hard level. So do that in this game. All right, number two, get the transition game going again. You look at it on the season. Kansas is, overall, the numbers have been dipping, but for the season, they're averaging over 11 fast break points per game. But in Big 12 only games, they're down to 8.6 fast break points per game. That puts them in just the 40th percentile during conference-only games, so basically below average. Well, Colorado has been a very bad transition defense. So far in conference-only games, Colorado is giving up 13.5 transition points per game. That puts them in the 4th percentile nationally, so they have not been a good transition defense. You're coming off a game against Kansas State where you only had 6 fast break points, and that's been kind of the norm for KU of late. They haven't been getting in the fast break as much. I don't know if that's team just emphasizing, getting back on that end. I don't know if that has to do with Kansas playing more 2 and some even 3 big basketball where you don't have as many like fast guards and wings on the court to, sprint down the court and get those transitions. I don't know what the reason is. Does it go back to the energy thing, right? You think of the Kansas State where you have like the 5-on-3 and I don't know. Is it an energy thing? Is it a mentality thing? Who knows? I don't know what's causing it, but it's got to change. Like this team consistently year in and year out, like Bill Self teams, even the ones that aren't like ultra athletic, are usually pretty good in transition. And early in the season, this team was. Lately, they haven't been. Like, that's an area you can make this offense better. Even if your half-court offense doesn't get any better, if you can average another 3 or 4 points per game in transition per game back to what you were doing on the season, as opposed to what you're doing in conference play, right, that could be the difference of 1 win, 2 wins down the stretch, which could mean everything to what seed you get or, where you go in the NCAA tournament. Number 3 here, and by the way, going back to that one, getting out in transition, going back to matchup number 1, the energy, what area of the game do you get the most momentum plays? Do you get the biggest energy plays? It's not always, but like a lot of times it is in transition. that's a lot of times where you can get an open three, you can get a dunk, you can do something pretty special. So anyway, number 3, play vertical defense without fouling. We mentioned earlier, Colorado gets to the free throw line. In Big 12 only play, they're in the 67th percentile in terms of free throw attempt rate. Overall for the season, Colorado is in the 79th percentile for free throw attempt rate. They get to the free throw line at a good amount, and they knock them down at a fair amount too. So far this season for Kansas, they haven't really been getting to the free throw line themselves. So like if you're putting Colorado to the line a bunch, that's going to be a big advantage for them in kind of the point scoring ability. And so I think that's going to be kind of interesting here. You look at the Kansas defense, though, they have done in conference-only games an excellent job at not fouling teams. I think that is one thing Hunter Dickinson does a good job of. He avoids fouls and does a good job just kind of staying vertical on the defensive end. Like, probably also hasn't helped KU that sometimes they're just not there on the defensive end. So if it's uncontested, you're not going to foul the guy. But, you look at it, Kansas right now is in the 96th percentile in free throw attempt rate defense. So they are doing a good job avoiding that to this point in time. But you look at it, like Colorado's biggest win of the season, they upset UConn in the Maui Invitational. And you go and look at that game, what was one thing they did really well? They got to the free throw line. 28 free throw attempts for for Colorado in their upset of the Huskies. So can you avoid sending them to the free throw line a bunch, right? It is a strength for them. So like, you're not just going to completely take it away, but I think it also goes in line with the idea that if you do that, you're probably going to avoid key players getting in foul trouble too, which would obviously benefit KU 2 times. And overall, Colorado has not been a great 2-point offense in Big 12 play. They haven't shot the 3 well. So if you're taking away the free throws, they kind of run out of areas. Like at that point, they're just hoping that they're uncharacteristically hot, right? So can you do a good job being vertical, being there defensively, but not fouling, not, overreaching or overextending in some way, and just make them shoot over you and not go to the free throw line a ton. Let's finish up here. Players to watch. Who is high on the go-off list for KU against Colorado? This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of the show. We will have a postcast episode after the KU Colorado game that you can tune into late Tuesday night or into your Wednesday morning. On Thursday, we're going to talk about, can the Jayhawks win a title? We're going to take a statistic-based approach and compare how Kansas stacks up in different areas to past March Madness champions to see, is Kansas good enough, or what areas would they be lacking in to win a title? Then on Friday, we'll get into a Kansas-Utah preview. If there is any breaking news, we'll get to that too, anywhere you get your podcasts or on our YouTube page with Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget also, you can make Locked On College Basketball, Locked On Big 12, Locked On College Football, one of those your second, third, heck, even fourth listens every day here with the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, so KU taking on Colorado, player matchup to watch. We're going to go Julian Hammond against Dajuan Harris. So Hammond is the lone Buffalo averaging double-digit points, but he's doing it on very good efficiency, right? It's very impressive, the production he has had on, even though it hasn't been a great team, the fact that he is shooting 40% from 3 when he is for sure the top target that you have to go after if you're an opposing team is really impressive, right? I mean, you're getting the best defenders, you're getting the highest attention to detail from the opposition, and you're still shooting very efficiently. So for Kansas, can you take him out of that efficiency a little bit, right? If you take him away, so overall in the season, Colorado shooting like 34% from 3. And again, that number, as I've mentioned several times in this podcast, is down to 31% in Big 12 play. But if you take away Hammond from the rest of the team, and this would be for the overall portion of the season, not just Big 12 play, they go down from shooting 34% as a team from 3-point range to shooting just 32% from 3-point range overall in the season. Now, if we look at Big 12 only play for Hammond, he has been 21 of 55 from 3. That's 38%. If you take that away from them shooting only 31% in conference only play from 3, I mean, I didn't do the math on that one, but it's got to be 29, 30% at that point in time. So if you can slow him down or make him inefficient, it becomes just that much harder for Colorado when it's already been hard enough for them so far this season. And you look at Dajuan Harris, he's been a good defender. I think there, at times he hasn't been necessarily locked down, as maybe been more, go for steals and stuff, but there has been some games he's been locked down. And I think it'll be interesting how he does in this specific matchup. And, can you stay on the court, going back to Colorado, that they draw fouls, right? Avoid that after you just had a 3-foul first half against K-State. And, just kind of get the ability to slow him down, but also take advantage of the fact that Colorado turns the ball over a lot. Well, Dajuan Harris is as good as anybody on this Kansas team in getting those steals and getting those swipes. So I think that is the matchup of the game, especially when you're looking for Dajuan Harris, missing all that time with that foul trouble in the first half against K-State. You saw his value. You saw his value in the game that he missed against UCF. They could really use his presence out there in a big way against the Buffaloes. High on the go-off meter for me in this one for KU. So Colorado gives up one of the highest rates of above-the-break threes this season so far in conference play. They're in the top, I don't even know how to say this, top 20% in terms of, the most attempted above-the-break threes by percentage of shots teams are taking. Point being, who takes a lot of above-the-break threes for Kansas? That would be one Mr. Mayo. Zeke Mayo has taken 4.8 above the break threes per game, and he is knocking them down at a very high clip. Zeke Mayo is shooting 46% on above the break threes so far this season on almost 5 attempts per game. That is remarkable for what he's doing. Plus, I guess cross this off on the Locked On Jayhawk bingo board. Hey, Zeke Mayo home road splits because Zeke Mayo at home. Here's his updated home splits. 18 points per game, 5.6 rebounds, 3 assists per game. He is shooting 48% from the floor, 44% from three, 83% at the foul line on 7 3-point attempts per game. Zeke has been awesome at home, and he takes a lot above the break threes where Colorado gives up a lot of them. So big game for him. I will also mention Diggy Coit is second on KU in such shots, but he's only shooting them 21%, which is not great. Rylan Griffen is third on KU in such shots, 42%. I want to see if Bill Self sticks with Rylan Griffen in the starting lineup. He hasn't had good shooting games. He's gotten some good looks, though. Like, those are going to fall eventually. I would like to see him in there, especially against a team who does give up a bunch above the break threes. I would think that this could be a slump buster, so to speak, for Rylan Griffen. But yeah, Zeke Mayo is the official pick for KU on the high on the go-off meter. All right, we'll be back for that KU Colorado recap after the game and plenty more KU content coming at you right here with Locked On Jayhawks throughout the week. So make sure to subscribe anywhere you get your podcast as well as on our YouTube page. See you next time with LOJ.